So, according to Melody Hudson, the first step to solving a problem is to handle it, to not hide from it, but to handle it. So, when addressing the question of how do the social identities impact myself and my students in my school, the first place that I look at is that we are a small population, largely white, with a small minority of a couple African American students, a couple Hispanic students, and a couple of Asian students. Um, the diversity in my population comes mainly from the socioeconomic status of the families. Um, we range from very well off families who live in very nice houses on large amounts of property, they own farms, um, all the way down to families who are next to homelessness. A big part of having a diverse community like that is the implementation of data and how we use that and how we gather it. Just as Abington School District did, they used that data to drive their instruction to close the gaps of these students. Once you have hard numbers showing the deficiencies, you can then address those particular ones and help close that gap to level the playing field. Another aspect of this in my school has to do with the cliques. There aren't a ton of middle class families in my school. There are a lot of well off and a lot of impoverished families, and you can see that gathering in the hallways. You have a lot of students who are dressed very nice. Their upkeep is very nice. How they speak to each other, their vocabulary, their topics of discussion sets them apart from the students who come from families in poverty, whose vocabulary is much less. You hear much more cursing. The topics are much more adult. So when you come in, you can definitely see a class difference with my students. And with the lower population, the population of lower socioeconomic status, there's a lack of value of education coming from those homes. So one thing that the Massachusetts school system did was providing these out-of-school learning opportunities, which many of my students lack. They go home to families whose parents either did not or barely graduated high school. They work blue collar, and they just simply do not see the value of education and what that can bring for these children. And it's definitely passed on. It's generational poverty. Part of the difficulty in teaching the small population is introducing cultural diversity to the students. The students that are culturally diverse have been brought up around the area, so culturally they're the same as the white students. Being a small community like that, they're all the same. They're all proud to be from a logging community, a coal community, a big timber community. So it's hard for me to try to instill this global vision into them. So I try to take as many steps as I can to bring in literature, as I'm an 8th grade and 7th grade English teacher, from around the world and introduce them to things outside of America and outside of their small community. And when looking at the question, what assumptions we make about people from different races, ethnicities, and cultures, this one's somewhat difficult to break down. Basically, the assumptions that we make about people are pure ignorance. Only ignorant people are making those assumptions. Those assumptions are preset from people that have brought you up as a human to give you those assumptions. They're not there. Something that's hard to break. It goes down to the root of racism. These assumptions and these things that you say to kind of make yourself feel better all stem from this fear of the unknown, this fear of being different. And it causes the stereotyping. Stereotyping not only with race and culture, but also stereotyping within the classes. Um, we've been reading The Outsiders in my class, and we've been diving deep into stereotyping and where people come from, and these issues of class and classism. Um, with the question about students, some students achieving and some students not achieving, the first spot to stop is learning disabilities and understanding that there's this problem. And just as Massachusetts school system did, um, they needed to expand the time. They expanded resources, but they also understood that students need more services. In order to level the playing field, they have a lot of catch up to do, and that catch up requires extra time. Just in sports, if you need extra practice, the only way to do that is to practice more. So it's a time factor, and that needs to be built into the public education system. Another thing that has to do with this gap in achievement is the students' upbringing in their home lives. Also in Massachusetts, there needs to be support for student health and student well-being. A lot of my students are coming from homes with serious abuse, serious neglect, real problems where students are coming to school not only hungry or poorly dressed, they're coming worrying about their dad or their grandpa getting a job or paying bills or them not showering because they don't have water turned on. So providing these opportunities for students to kind of take a load off of these adult problems that they face is huge. And if they can't pay for these services that are required for basic living, there's no way that they can provide extra services to help them out. So that's something that we as educators, as an education system, need to provide for them. The last part I feel is American culture. Holding students accountable, holding them to high stakes, and pushing them to achievement. Not accepting some of the things in society that we have come to as fact, but really pushing the kids. The importance of developing equity in my classroom stems for me from my socioeconomic status of my community. My students are coming to me with huge academic and social gaps. So something that Abington school system did was started implementing best practices. If we know that these students are coming in at different levels with their academics, we need to have the strategies to support that. There is research out there, and there are research-based strategies that we can use to help close that gap, but there needs to be access to them. So as a school system, not just classroom to classroom here and there, but there needs to be these best practices for all of these students so they don't succeed in just one class, but they succeed in academics. A second part of it is fairness. And my fairness rule has been in play ever since I started teaching. I got it from my mom. I have a sign that she's had up in her classroom for 20 plus years that she gave to me in my first year of teaching. It says fairness is not all students getting the same thing. Fairness is every student receiving what he or she needs. And that's something that I've lived my life by in my career as an educator. I provide different students with different things because it's what they need. And the goal is to provide every student with an equal playing field, with equity. And by following that rule, I think I can achieve that. Which goes on to the golden rule. It's how I deliver that. I treat every student how I would want to be treated. If I know a student's dad went to jail over the weekend, I'm going to give that student what he needs because I know how I would be if that happened to me. So that student is going to receive something different that day and that week or that month. than the rest of my students. How this perspective is going to affect the way I teach, I really need to focus more on moral character. I spend a lot of time on that, but I feel like I can fit it in more than I already have. I have a unit coming up called the Moral Compass, and I'm going to dive very deep into that and go much beyond the text and the curriculum and really pull in some of these things that I've picked up from not only this class but my previous courses so far in this master's program. I'm going to continue to look for the teachable moments, these moments where I can catch an injustice or catch a great moment of diversity, and really shine light on it and show them, the right way to handle things and ethical dilemmas and moral dilemmas, and walk them through them in real life scenarios, these moments that these students are actually having themselves. Part of the 2 points that I just talked about is being able to integrate that into an existing curriculum, which is what West Orange did from New York. They selected a curriculum that would allow for these moral lessons and these teachable moments to come in. And in my district, I'm part of the Curriculum Adoption Committee, and we're examining curriculums right now, and that is one of the non-negotiables that we have for the new curriculum, is it needs to be flexible to where we can focus on our community's diversity and our small town feel, and be able to use what we already have, but then use our pedagogy and what we can bring as educators. My fourth point is just practicing empathy and that support, really putting yourself in the shoes of the students. These students are people just like us. They have ups, they have downs, and we need to recognize those and use those to our benefit. The last part of it is differentiation, modification, and adaptation. Students change, people change, systems change. We need to be able to change with that, and we need to be able to change with our students. Every lesson we give, we need to be thinking about the students and which students need differentiation or which students need a very altered, modified lesson. So knowing your students is one of the best things you can have as an educator. If you don't know your students, you can't reach them at a deep enough level to form a relationship and begin high stakes and high academic achievement. Through reading the text, Excellence Through Equity, and the research with West Orange, Abington, and Massachusetts, I've picked up a lot of thinking points and hard facts that are really making me focus and reflect on myself as a teacher and how I approach education and how I approach my students and how big of a difference that I can make in their lives. So with that, it is time to get to work and see how well I can get my students to perform. Thank you.